Hi, this is Michael Belowski with The Last Defense. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, comment, as always. Today I want to talk about the new vaccine schedule that is being proposed by the Trump administration. In short, it's a drastic reduction in the number of shots that children will be recommended to take in order to attend schools. Excuse me. This is going to be a dramatic change. I want to start by talking about my background as a journalist because this is important to me. I've been a journalist for about 2 decades. I graduated from Seton Hall University in '05. Immediately, one of the first stories that I began to cover and recognize as tremendously important was potential damages from vaccinations, from over vaccinations. And basically, my experience, I'm 44 years old. I remember being young and in school. I went to a school in upstate New York with about several hundred students in all, around 70 to 100 students per grade. And there were no autistic children. There was very few children who had learning disabilities, cognitive or neurological disabilities. It was a rare thing. And I'm old enough to know that when the mainstream media, the pharmaceutical industry is the largest funder of mainstream media, so you do not and will not hear the truth about pharmaceutical products and or vaccines from the mainstream media. And I know that when they say they're just finding more of it because they test more for it, that's not true. Young people hear that and they might believe that because they don't know anything else. They've only known this world where so many people have autism and or neurological disorders. I'm old enough to know for a fact that's not true. And in fact, if you look around, this is just a common sense point that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. from, the Trump administration and the MAHA movement, the Make America Healthy Again movement, once said when I was covering his presidential run in New Hampshire back in, I think it was 2023. He said, look around and try to find somebody over 40 years old who has autism and or all these disorders. You might find one in like a whole state, or like out of thousands and thousands of people, you might find one, but it's nothing, not even comparable to the numbers that you find people in their 30s, people in their 20s, even more, people 20 or younger. It's like in a modern public school classroom now, it's almost every classroom that there's somebody that's been officially diagnosed with autism. I would say almost without question, every classroom you have people, students with neurological disorders and learning disabilities. Does or such, that was not the case when I was a child, when I was young in 19. I was born in 1982. So what this act does is it dramatically reduces, I'm going to share my screen, but while I'm bringing that up, I'll say it dramatically reduces the number of shots that children are required to take to attend school. I believe by the time you're 18 years old with the current schedule, the schedule before these new recommendations, you would get something up of like 70 something shots by the time you're 18 years old, by the time you're, living on your own. There's my notes for the show. I'm going to bring up, this is the press release from the White House. If you try to look up the same story on any mainstream media, again, big pharma runs the media, you will get, Trump administration goes off the rails on vaccines. Trump administration puts out disinformation on vaccines. It's all negative. It's all critical. It's all, we can't possibly do this. This is a bad idea, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to go straight to the White House to get their take on it instead of the pharmaceutical industry's funded media, their take on it. That's not an honest take. This is the take straight from the White House. Delivering gold standard childhood vaccine recommendations for Americans. So again, a dramatic reduction. Here you see in this 1, 2, 3 part right here. I'm just going to highlight real quick. So these are the three groups now. that you're going to see for vaccines. Immunizations recommended for all children. So these are the ones that they will recommend now to go to school. Measles, mumps, rubella, diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, polio, hemophilus, influenza type B. I'm not going to read them all, but you can see there's several of them. Some of these might be combination shots, but in all, there's about a dozen or less vaccines there. Then there's a next group is for people of certain high risk populations. You have the hepatitis A, hepatitis B, meningococcal B. I'm probably saying these wrong. Dengue, I don't even know how to pronounce that. And then there's a third group that says shared. This is based on shared clinical decision making, aka your choice. Hepatitis A, hepatitis B, rotavirus, meningococcal disease, influenza, COVID-19. All of these are ultimately a choice because most states in the United States of America allow you at least a religious exemption and or a philosophical exemption, meaning personal beliefs. So in Vermont, we have the religious exemption. In New York State, there is no exemption. They took them all away. So part of what this act does by the White House is that it addresses that situation. I can't, there's a lot of text here, so I'm not going to go looking for it, but it says somewhere in here that they are going to be basically interacting with states to make sure that they uphold constitutional values and principles when it regards to, frankly, your body, your choice. A pharmaceutical product you should not be forced to take. If the product works, if it demonstrates on the market to be safe and effective, consumers can observe that via their own observations and determine via their own free will, yes, this is a product that I need to take, and the benefits outweigh the risks. So another part of my notes, and this is probably the most important thing, it's right here. Talk about the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1986. So I pulled up an article for this. This is the Heritage Foundation's part of their key takeaways about this new move by the White House. The National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1986 removed the economic incentive that held vaccine developers accountable for vaccine safety. So in any other industry on Earth, basically, if a product damages or injures you or its user, they are liable for damages. You can sue them in court and win damages. What happened with vaccines was in the 1980s, when I was born, there were only 3 shots. There were only 3 vaccines that you were required to take to go to school. And even with only 3 vaccines on the schedule, enough people were getting injured or damaged by the shots that several companies that were making these vaccines, all of them went out of business, except for one. And that one, I forgot which one it was, but they went to the government and essentially said, we can't, these are not profitable anymore. We're getting sued too much. We need help. And the government, and it like sort of inexplicably, if you ask me, Ronald Reagan, a conservative president who's supposed to stand up for personal rights and freedoms and whatnot, nonetheless, he ultimately signed this act into law in 1986. So vaccine companies can now they can have injuries to the people that take their products, and those injured cannot sue. If you die or a family member dies, nobody can sue the vaccine maker for remedies for that unfortunate event. There is what's called the Vaccine Adverse Effects Reporting System, which was also created in 1986. This is essentially a publicly funded, as in not funded by the vaccine companies, compensation system for reported injuries from vaccines. They're, again, not paid for by the vaccine manufacturers, paid for by the public. That's an important point, as you can imagine. Another important thing to know and remember about VAERS is that Harvard University did a study roughly 20 years ago on the efficacy of this program. How many vaccine injuries are actually reported and recorded by this program versus how many there actually are. According to a Harvard University study, less than 0.5% of VAERS of actual vaccine injuries are ever reported by VAERS. That's really important when you consider that VAERS has paid out over $5 billion in damages for vaccines since its creation. That's with a $250,000 cap on all payouts, meaning if you die or if a loved one dies from a vaccine and you prove that the death was caused by the vaccine, the maximum payout is $250,000 that you can collect. That is, and again, paid for by the public, not by the vaccine manufacturer. So a lot of things wrong with that program. I'm going to just glance at my notes real quick. I want to talk about Aaron Siri and measles and cancer deaths because Aaron Siri was interviewed. He is a lawyer. He has a law firm with, I think he's got like 100 folks working for him, about 20 of whom which work with the VAERS system that I just got done talking about. So he's very familiar with fighting in the courts in this VAERS court about vaccine damages. He was in a case, he was explaining on the Tucker Carlson show about, he was explaining many different misconceptions and falsehoods pushed by the big pharma funded mass media. One of which is that he gave the example of the measles vaccine. You often hear vaccine defenders talk about, well, the measles vaccine saved everybody, measles was killing everyone, blah, blah, blah. So the real numbers are, by the time the vaccine for measles showed up, I believe it was in the 60s. I might be wrong about that. But anyway, in the kind of late but mid 20th century, there were 400 deaths per year from measles. Now, that number was going down. It actually started going up again when the vaccine came out. So the vaccine didn't even do what it was supposed to do. I don't have the exact data on that, but generally speaking, Aaron Siri was saying that the vaccine death, not the vaccine deaths, measles cases actually started going up again. People were naturally becoming more and more naturally immune to measles. And then the measles vaccine came out and suddenly there were more measles. But another thing he explained, this is very important to understand. He said, so there have been studies, multiple studies, that when you get natural measles, not measles via the vaccine, natural, actual measles, when you get the actual virus, it creates apparent, I don't want to say immunity outright, but it reduces, studies have been done, it reduces cases in cancer deaths and also cardiovascular disease. He gave just the example of cardiovascular disease. So we were having 400 deaths, I'm not 400 deaths, 800,000 deaths per year of cardiovascular disease in the US. And there was a 20% reduction observed in people who got the natural measles virus. So if you do the math, that's like over 100,000, maybe 150,000 more people dying just of cardiovascular disease. Also, numbers for various cancers go down after you get natural measles. So you have more people dying of cardiovascular disease, more people dying from cancer because they are no longer getting the natural measles. The measles vaccine does not have the same effect. I want to talk about a chart that RFK Jr. put up when he was running for president in 2003. This is before he joined the Trump administration. He showed from 1986 on a steady increase in autism and cardiovascular disease. In autism and cardiovascular disease, starting with 1986. So I don't have that chart with me. It was on one of my articles that I wrote on that very presentation that he did. And unfortunately, all my articles have been taken off the internet. I can't explain that. It would, I've written hundreds and hundreds of articles for various publications over the last decade. I'd say 95 to 98% of those articles are no longer available. but I'm sure if you look it up, you're probably not the first ones to come up on Google. Again, corporate media owned by big pharma. But if you dig hard enough, I'm sure you could probably find that. I want to tell a story about my aunt-in-law, I guess you would say, who died after taking the I'm gonna just increase my screen here, who died after taking the COVID-19 vaccine in Korea. So it's my mother-in-law's aunt, I mean sister. So I guess I don't know what you would call that, but anyway, we'll call it a relative. She took the vaccine at the hospital. She never made it out the door. She died. The hospital would not declare it a vaccine reaction. They said she fell and hit her head. So there you go. Again, think of the VAERS stat that I offered, but the Harvard University study, most instances, actual instances of vaccine injury never actually get reported by VAERS. What else do I have here? So that's pretty much my take for this show. So thank you for listening. I think there were just one or two more points that I'm going to try to make before I sign off. A Rasmussen poll, yeah, this is on here. A Rasmussen poll determined that more than 50% of Americans know somebody, believe they know somebody who died from the COVID vaccine, not COVID-19, from the COVID vaccine. Again, more than half of Americans believe, according to a Rasmussen poll, they know someone who died from that. So again, I've been doing journalism for all my adult professional life. I consider vaccine injuries one of the biggest cover-ups in mass media history, if not the biggest. I think it's right up there with any other story, really. Um, Again, this is The Last Defense on YouTube. Like, share, comment, spread the word. Help us. We are the alternative media. We are not the big funded mainstream media. We are trying to bring you stories and with angles that you will not hear in the mainstream media. So I'm looking over my notes here just to make sure I covered it all, and I believe I have. Again, I'm 44 years old. I was alive when the numbers were much lower. I believe in the 1970s, it was about 1 in 4,000. It was either 40,000 or 4,000. Anyway, thousands. We'll just say thousands. 1 in thousands of people would have autism. Now it's 1 in 32 or something like that nationwide. In California, it's like 1 in 12 for boys and 1 in 20 something overall. Something's obviously going on. There's no denying it. And it also has a cost in terms of now every classroom has to have para educators. Those are the teachers that help the teachers for the students that need extra help. That was never a thing before when I was a kid. All right. With that, I've got a lot going on in this house. I need to sign off again. The Last Defense at YouTube. Like, share, comment, keep following us, support us. Live, be well, tell the truth. Signing off.